Hello, let's start with a short revision of last week's lecture. Last week we were talking about money lending and we treated three main pieces of legislation. First, the Money Lending Business Act. I told you that this act has to do with registration and supervision, and also the regulation of business activities. You need to remember, for example, that when doing collections, businesses need to take care to observe these prohibitions. We also said that the same act includes a prohibition on excessive loans. So the businesses need to investigate the repayment capacity and depending on the amounts, there is an obligation to ask for the submission of, for example, withholding records. We also talked about the Interest Rate Restriction Act, which has some limits regarding the interest rate, and these limits depend on the principal. Last week, I forgot to talk about the bottom part of this slide. A student asked me about this, so my additional explanation is, as I told you, if I remember correctly, it was Ken who told me about the meaning of mandatory provisions in English. You all know what a mandatory provision is. A mandatory provision is a provision which you cannot change even if you officially agree. No matter how many signatures and seals you put, your agreement is void. You need to follow the provision. Now, this slide says, even if the debtor pays amounts exceeding voluntary, such amounts are appropriated to the principal and not to the interest. So, here, the skills of the students of the Faculty of Economics are required because you're able to do calculations. So, for example, let's say that I borrowed 2 million yen. The interest rate limit for that agreement is 15%, but we agreed on 30%. And let's say that my parents have been telling me, oh, when you borrow something and when you agree on something, you need to keep your promises. It's your fault. You have promised to pay a 30% interest rate, so do that. And let's say that I actually do that. I pay double the interest I should pay according to this restriction. The question is, what happens with the amount which exceeds this limit? The answer is that it's appropriated to the principal. Is that so important? Yes, it is, because when the principal becomes less, the interests which occur from the principal also become less. This had a very, very big importance under the system of voluntary payments of interest exceeding. As I told you, this does not exist anymore, but in the past it did. So, there was always the question of the appropriation of interest. We talked about the gray zone, which does not exist anymore. And finally, we talked about the procedures. So, let's move to today's material. it's already lecture 11, which means that I will see you for 3 more times, 12, 13, 14. The 15th lecture is the exams. So you should feel happy. The exams are approaching. It's a good feeling. You have something to do, okay? You cannot say, oh, I have nothing to do all day. So, now, yes, so it's lecture 11. And last week I forgot to show you some Japanese mangas because this lecture is called Law and Culture in Japan. This is a Japanese manga which has to do with money lending. It's called Naniwa Kinyudo, and I think it also became a film, if I'm not... Yes, it did. Thank you, Saki. It's quite interesting, but also quite heavy, so please read it when you don't have any issues, any problems in your personal life, because it's quite heavy. And this is even more heavy. Yamikin Ushijima-kun. The name is quite cute, but the content is, on the contrary, quite gross and also heavy. And I think this also became a movie. Oh, I was waiting a yes from Chisaki, but yes, I think it also became. No? Is that a no, or is it? I don't know. You don't know. Anyway, so yeah, I'm pretty sure that it also became a movie. It's even more heavy with quite brutal scenes, etc. So if you are going to read it after the exams, okay, during the summer vacations. I received many questions regarding the procedures. You seem to be quite interested in the procedures part. So please remember that adjustment of debts is something you do. It's a negotiation you do with your lenders. So it's negotiation and settlement procedure. And if you do that a bit more officially, it becomes a specified mediation, which means that you also have a mediator assisting the procedure. However, your questions had to do with numbers 2 and 3, so I added a bit of information according to your questions. We were talking about personal bankruptcy, and we were saying that if it's impossible for the debtor to pay, then he can apply to the court, his property is liquidated, but he can also achieve an order of grant of discharge. Many students ask me, wow, so you just borrow a lot of money, you go to the Bahamas, to Hawaii, you use that money, and then you say, oh sorry, I cannot repay, so I use this procedure. The answer is no, because there are some reasons for not granting discharge. For example, reducing one's property unfairly, or by gambling, or having been granted a discharge within a period of 7 years. Which means that, as you can easily understand, you cannot use it when you have, on purpose, intentionally, just used all your property to other purposes, for example. You cannot use it for continuously, consecutively. You need to wait for 7 years, for example. And I also received a lot of questions regarding the qualification restrictions. Lawyers, certified public accountants, life insurance agents, and security guards, etc. are some jobs you cannot actually perform after using this procedure. So you see that it seems to be useful, but it's also not so useful if you want to keep living a normal life after it. That's why people, and maybe you remember the part from the book we were reading last week, which was saying that, oh, this procedure seems better. Even the sound is better for a Japanese person. It's not bankruptcy, but it's rehabilitation. And we were saying that it's only for debtors with total debts of 50 million yen or less, and for debtors who will have a continuous or repetitive future income. You apply to the court. Depending on the amount of your debts, you receive a reduction to 20%, and you pay the remaining amount in installments, in principle, within 3 years. However, last week I omitted the details. You need to obtain the creditors resolution, which means that all the creditors need to say, not all, sorry, half or more of the creditors need to say yes to your repayment plan. So it needs to be something which seems feasible. Okay? Also, there are some special rules for persons having a salary income. Why is that? Well, a salary is really continuous and repetitive, which means that you have more chances of being able to repay your debts, which means that, for example, you don't need creditors' resolution. They are just asked for their opinion, but it's not a resolution. So if you have a salary income, it's easier for you, even more easier for you to use this procedure. Any questions regarding last week's lecture? No. So, let's start with today's lecture. Oh yes, I know that some of you might be a bit tired because yesterday you had to watch TV a lot. We were having elections. Yes. So yesterday morning I was surfing and I did this. I went to yahoo.co.jp and I did a search with Senkyo, which means elections in Japanese. The first two results have to do with AKB, and the third is Wikipedia. And in Japan, you're allowed to vote from 18 years old. Oh my god. So this should not be like this, okay? Usually, if you go to other countries, Google or something, and you do a search, you find the official websites, etc. You don't find the AKB website on the top. But anyway, yeah. So, okay. Maybe it's also part of our democratic activities. I'm not sure. So, if you have a look at today's material, the last page is a very interesting article from the Japan Times. It's quite long, but it's perfect for today's lecture. So I need 1, 2, 3, 4 students to read the article. Could you please raise your hands? So we have Enzo. Thank you, Enzo. We have Chisaki and Ridi, and we need one more student. Thank you. We have Ken, so it's 4. Who would like to start? Thank you, Enzo. And thank you for also approaching. You have 3 more lectures to see. So you can keep moving 1 desk per week. They are trying to prevent you from doing that, you see. They have no open desk. But okay, don't feel angry about that. You can negotiate and okay. So, Enzo, I leave it to your decision. You start reading the article and you stop when you have read 1/4. Sorry. You start reading and you just stop when you think that you have read 1/4 of the article and you pass the microphone to Chisaki.
Okay. Telephone fraud. Hello, is it me you're looking for? By Jake Adelson. For young sociopathic entrepreneurs in Japan, the best way to get rich quick is by learning to say the following 3 lines convincingly. It's me. Help me, mama. Wire the money now. Damages from special fraud cases in Japan totaled a record of 48.69 billion yen in 2013, a 34% increase from the previous high of 36.44 billion yen that was posted in 2012, according to National Police Agency statistics. The special fraud cases are a blanket term for what was originally dubbed It's me, fraud. Oreore, I don't read the... Oreore sagi.
Oh, yes.
Okay. The first time the phrases is likely to have appeared in print was on February 13, 2003, in the Totori edition of the Asahi Shimbun. Man pretends to be son, makes victims, wire money, Yonago police arrest and file charges for fraud, the Asahi headline said.
The article said police officers had completed their investigation and prosecuted an unemployed suspect, 32, for alleged fraud. He had pretended to be a family or friend of strangers on the telephone and repeatedly defrauded them out of cash. According to the article, the suspect phoned a total of 11 men and women living in Shimane or Osaka prefectures at random between August 1999 and December 2002. At the beginning of the call, he would say, it's me," and would pose as a friend or son of the victim. He used a variety of lines to collect funds. I need living expenses, I want a computer, or I can't pay back my loans. He was suspected of defrauding the victims of a total of 10.67 million yen. The article carried a warning from the police that advised people to calmly and carefully check the identity of any person calling them in order to avoid being deceived. That warning was since been repeated for 11 years. This short article outlined a prototype of a fraud that has since evolved and branched out. The variations are so great that the name for it has changed several times over the years. When It's Me became too well known, different ruses were used, and the police renamed it Wire Me the Money Fraud, or Furikome Sagi. The Metropolitan Police Department decided last year that a better moniker was needed to create public awareness, and after taking submissions from the public, selected Help Me Mom Fraud, Kasan Tasukete Sagi, as the winner. The runner-up was Fake Telephone Fraud, Nisedenwa Sagi, while another option, using parental love for their children fraud, Shinshin Ryo Sagi, Oyagokoro Ryo Sagi, had legs but didn't catch on. The National Police Agency this year has chosen to include such cases in the category labeled Special Fraud, which includes 8 different types. There are cases in which the bogus callers pass themselves off over the telephone as loved ones of the victims, often elderly, and ask for urgent money transfers to get them out of trouble. Troubles include running afoul of gangsters, traffic accidents, or getting their girlfriend pregnant. People are charged for visits to internet sites they never used, usually pornographic. There's even an elaborate scheme that requires 2 swindlers working in tandem to pull off. One culprit calls the victim pretending to be the police and warns them that their bank account has been compromised. Their partner then visits the mark's home, posing as an employee of the Japanese Bankers Association, and collects the person's bank cards, personal details, and ATM codes. Needless to say, at this point, the person's bank account really is compromised, and the criminals withdraw as much cash as they can before ditching the cars. This month, a group of 3 teenagers were arrested for scamming several hundred people out of 408 million yen using the It's Me trick. Police seized 550 bank cards the boys used during their crime spree. While police note that many of these frauds involve Yakuza, it's also apparent that civilians are ranking in the dirty lucre as well.
Thank you, Lily. You did a very good job. Actually, you read quite a long part, which means that maybe Enzo and Chisaki should buy you lunch next week. I'm not sure. You can negotiate that. Thank you. Ken, please. So Ken, read half of the remaining, and I need one more student who would like to help us. One more student. Thank. So how do you say? Okay, thank you. So Ken, could you please continue?
Okay. I used to think that only Japanese people fell for this trick, but that's clearly not the case. Kimiaki Nishida, a noted psychologist at...
So sorry, I think you should start from the previous paragraph. Is that true?
Oh.
Okay. Yes, lady?
Some police officers and gangsters claim that practice existed in the late 1990s. It just didn't have a fancy moniker. Swiss journalist Nathalie Kulturstaki, in an April article for the Japanese monthly Zaiten magazine, says that its May fraud was even found in Europe as early as 2000. In Switzerland and France, it's known as a Frogs Noble, fake nephew fraud.
Thank you. Could you please pass once the microphone to Enzo? We have a French person here, and this is French. I would like to hear it in the French accent. Sorry, Karen. So, I would read it faux neveu, but...
Faux neveu.
Oh, could you please read it once more? It's like the sound.
Faux neveu.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
You want again or? Okay, I can do it again.
Okay, once more.
Faux neveu.
Thank you very much. So now you know how it sounds in French too. Thank you. Yes, Ken, could you please continue?
Yeah. I still think that only Japanese people fell for this trick, but that's really not the case. Kimiaki Nishida, a noted psychologist at Risho University, explained why people fall for the scam. They mistake the voice on the phone for that of their son or a loved one because there's no way to verify who they are speaking with, Nishida said. They are made to feel unease, then fear, which is followed by a sense of urgency and emotion. And in the frazzled state, they can't make a rational decision. He suggests that the crime also take advantage of Japanese cultural values such as a tacit understanding, Ishin Denshin, and the samurai warriors' compassion, Bushi no Nasake. Handing over cash in person was the most prevalent form of delivering money into Switzerland. The National Police Agency said, accounting for a little more than 40% of the cases. Bank transfer worries for less than 40%. Postal and parcel services were used to deliver money as well.
Thank you very much, and let's move to Kelsey. Thank you, Ken. You were... Oh no, you are not the only Japanese. You are also Japanese. You were the only... How should I say that? True Japanese? No, you're also true Japanese. Not foreign educated. Oh, that's so diplomatic. Okay, so yeah, so not foreign educated Japanese. Okay, yeah. Now I sound like the ones who are talking about the sumo wrestling. You know, the champion. Oh, he's the only Japanese who is actually Japanese or not. Thank you. Yes, Kelsey. So could you please continue with the last part?
The crimes do not go unpunished. Law enforcement actions were taken against a record of 1,805 people in 2013, 27% of whom were Yakuza. Of those caught, 978 were suspects who collected the cash in person. Criminals of Japan, if you do the math, going in person isn't a wise choice. Damages from the classic version of impersonation fraud increased 52% to around 17 billion yen last year, and I'm guessing that those 3 teenage boys helped the tally swell. The techniques vary, but there is one thing that all scammers have in common, a veteran detective says. What is unforgivable about the crime is that it preys on the good intentions and kindness of people, the detective says. The aftermath of the crime is not just a loss of money, but a loss of trust and humanity. He has a point. I love the low crime rate in Japan, but if given a choice between how I'm robbed of my money, I prefer to be mugged or pay my Tokyo Electric Power Company electricity bill.
Thank you very much. So, you see that this article is actually really interesting because it's written by a foreigner who lives in Japan. So it has both the perspectives of the Japanese society and the foreign society. And today we are going to talk about this. We will try to combine some cultural elements with the legal aspects. So, the first question is, okay, we read about this. It still exists. That's why when my mother, who is an elderly person, went to the bank to withdraw a large amount of money, she was asked questions for around 1 hour because they thought that she was a victim of this. So, and she was not answering the questions properly. So because she has lived in Greece for 35, 36 years. So she was like, what do you care what I do with my money? And they were like, oh, that's a typical answer all the people who are victims of fraud say. So, and they were trying to see, etc. So, from a legal point of view, as we will say, it's a fraud case. Here you have the most recent amounts. You can see that the amounts are really huge. In 2016, the money stolen from such remittance fraud cases was about 37.5 billion yen, which means that it's a very large market, a very large business. And you can see that the overall amount stolen in so-called special frauds was about 40.7 billion yen, which means that the largest part of the money stolen was due to such remittance fraud cases. You can see that I'm using various English translations. Usually we use the Japanese term Furikome scams, which is easier, but it's not understandable by foreigners, so we also use remittance fraud cases, etc. So, Penal Code, Article 246, fraud. Who would like to read the provision? Yes, Yuki, could you pass the microphone to Yuki, please?
Article 246(1). A person who defrauds another of property shall be punished by imprisonment with work for not more than 10 years. 2. The same shall apply to a person who obtains or causes another to obtain a profit by the means described under the preceding paragraph.
Thank you very much. So, you can see that there are actually two requirements. The first is that a person defrauds another person and causes him or her to fall into error. And the second is that by doing this, he causes the latter to deliver money or other articles, or obtains economic benefit or causes others to obtain such. If you see the punishment, it's imprisonment with work. In Japanese, choeki. So as you remember, this means that according to the legislator, this is something which should be punished severely. So it's not imprisonment without work, it's with work, which means that according to the legislator, this is a crime which needs to be avoided more than other crimes. And you can see that it's not more than 10 years, which is quite a lot. So the maximum is 10 years, which is quite long. In some cases, as you might have heard, the people doing such frauds, it was also mentioned in the article, tell to some elderly people that, we are going to repay you some amounts that you have paid in excess, for example, taxes. So please go to the ATM. They make them go to the ATM and they tell them what to do in order to receive the money, but in fact make them transfer some money. So in that case, we can also use Article 246 too. Who would like to read the article? It's the next article. Yes, please. Okay, it's been a long time. I need you to remind me of your name, please.
Ayaka.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Ayaka, could you please read the article?
Article 246. 2. In addition to the provisions of Article 246, a person who obtains or causes another to obtain a profit by creating a false electromagnetic record relating to acquisition, loss or alteration of property rights by inputting false data or giving unauthorized commands to a computer utilized for the business of another, or by putting a false electromagnetic record relating to acquisition, loss or alteration of property rights into use for the administration of the matters of another shall be punished by imprisonment with work for not more than 10 years.
Thank you. So you see that the provision is quite complicated. A simple example would be using false, fake cards in order to use a train. So you create a card which gives the gate the impression that you're paying money, but you're actually not doing that, and you use that card in order, for example, to use a train. So it also includes the false or fake cards used to make phone calls. There was a period in Japan where such cards were circulating around and used by mostly us foreigners, not me, okay, I mean in general as a category, by foreigners to make phone calls to their home country, etc., which is also illegal. One thing you need to know, if you see the provisions, the provision about fraud says Article 246. The provision about computer fraud says 246-2. What does this 2 mean? It means that this provision was added afterwards, so it's a new provision. Why didn't they make it 247 then? Because you have to rewrite all the laws and all the books and all the official texts. But if you do it this way, you don't have to rewrite anything. The other provisions remain as they are, and you have this new provision. So, if you check some really bad written Japanese laws, you can even have, for example, 400-213, because it's a new provision, and then they say, oh, we need to have some new too, and then they make, then you have, etc. So it's better to rewrite, I think, but they don't do that because the numbers will change, etc. Next, in some cases, people realize that the person who is calling them, or for example, if you have a look again at the article on page 2, the article, this says people are charged for visits to internet sites they never used, usually pornographic. So in this case, they try first to defraud you. They will tell you that you have access to pornographic sites, so you need to pay. Please wire the money into this account. But if you tell them, no, I did not use it, then suddenly they become aggressive. They don't try to defraud you anymore, but they tell you, if you don't pay the money, then, etc., which becomes extortion. It's Article 249 of the Penal Code. Who would like to read the provision, please? Okay, so Chisaki, we will move to you later. Let's move to Yuki first.
Article 249. A person who extorts another to deliver property shall be punished by imprisonment with work for not more than 10 years. 2. The same shall apply to a person who obtains or causes another to obtain a profit by the means prescribed under the preceding paragraph.
Thank you. So, extortion is maybe the provision which is most strongly connected to the Japanese mafia, the so-called Yakuza. Usually, when we talk about extortion, people have this impression, so the answer is yes. It's also connected to school bullying, so-called ijime. So, In Japan, we have the tendency to use the term ijime, which means bullying or school bullying, but actually most cases would be simply extortion, kyokatsu. So maybe the naming is also important. When you talk about bullying, you have the impression of a child bullying another, but when you ask for money, for example, then it's actually a crime, it's extortion. So you see that sometimes the media are doing something bad by using certain namings or terms, etc. And in most cases, we have the impression that extortion needs to be like this. But as you saw, it can also be performed by phone calls, etc. if you put pressure on the other to pay money, etc. Any questions up to this point? No? So, let's have a short break of 5 minutes and we continue after that.
They are. I want to get one of those contacted because you can tailor it. So you can get someone
I feel like this is the same brand as Lay's.
I actually received the same question from two students, from Chisaki and from what's your name? Mao, yes, from Chisaki and Mao. They asked me, do we need to remember provisions, etc.? So I say, let's have a look at last year's exams. If the PC system allows us to do so, of course. Oh, do I need to do something here? Okay. Just wait for a while. Do we have any students or students who are familiar with the system? No? It has to do with your exams, so you should be willing to help me. But okay, then. Sorry? If you ask what?
In Japanese.
In Japanese who?
Ask everyone in Japanese.
Oh, okay. So yeah, could you do that, please?
なんか去年の試験問題を出そうとしてるんですけど、今なんかシステムがおかしくなってて、先生をヘルプできる人がいたら挙手してほしいって先生がおっしゃっています。
すみません。プレゼンもしかしたらわかりませんけど、もしかしたらプレゼンテーション映してる画像がそのパソコンの特性かどうかっていう、Windows キーと T キー同時に押してもらうと。自信ありませんか。
What's your name? Wow. So I would like to thank you for the idea and thank you very much for your help. Wow, okay, let's talk about that later. And it's the first time I actually heard you talking in Japanese, maybe. You sound like a different person. Yeah. Do you also speak other languages?
I'm learning Spanish right now.
Not French?
I'm learning French.
Oh, she's learning French. Okay. So, I guess you also sound like another person when you speak French and English? Or?
I don't know.
You don't know. Maybe you could try that next lecture. Okay. So let's move here. It's a bit important. So, these are the last year's exams for the same lecture. Wow, this is so hard to use anyway. So, for example, it says minors cannot be sentenced with death penalty. A person who has reached the age of 18 is no longer considered to be a minor. Both men and women can get married. I know that some of these are not included in the content we did this year because I haven't changed the content, but you will see the level of the questions. Both men and women can get married when they reach the age of 16 years old. Under the existing law, the statutory share in inheritance of a child out of wedlock is, I guess it says, half of that of a child in wedlock, for example. Oh, there is no limitation to the interest rate the lender and the borrower may agree on, for example, in cases of money lending contracts. Consumer Contract Act, according to the precedents, etc. So, what's your, could you pass the microphone to Chisaki and to Mao? Yeah, I need your opinion. So, do you think you need to remember the provisions exactly in order to answer these questions or not? No?
No.
No. Okay, so if you think it's not, then maybe you will make a mistake in the second part.
Oh my God.
Sorry, Masataka, could you please come here? I need your help. I'm still having an issue here. So, as you see, it's like this. Oh my God, it's so perfect. So, okay, so this part has changed. As I told you, last year they did not have some words to choose from, which created a chaos for me, because some of them were using words which are similar but a bit different, some of them were making spelling mistakes, etc. So I did not like that situation when correcting. I correct your papers in August, so you can realize how hard it is for me under the Japanese heat and moisture, etc. So, from this year, actually from last year's second semester, you have some words to choose from, which means that I need you to be careful because this part is a bit difficult. Why is that? You have the words to choose from, which means that, for example, here we have 5 gaps, I will give you 10 words. Here, you need to be careful. For example, this part, which says the reason for divorce stipulated in the civil code, actually, it's a provision. I have just almost copied and pasted a provision, but it's a provision we were talking about during last year's lectures a lot. we were saying these are the reasons for the divorce, we were explaining each of the reasons. But here, if I do this here, it will be a bit difficult. Why? Because I will use a provision and I will omit the keywords and give you some similar words. So if it's a key provision, yes, you need to remember it, but not memorize it. You need to remember the content, and then you can choose the correct words. Okay? And I will show you this again during the last lecture, but I received the question from 2 students. And the last part is like this. Choose one of the following 2 topics and explain your answer in the form of a short essay. This is only 20 points, so you receive 30 from the first question, and you have 30 sentences to choose from. As I told you, maybe last year it was 15, but the students were so brilliant and so fast, they finished in around 15 minutes and they were looking at the ceiling. So I was like, okay, maybe we should change this. So now you have 30 sentences, which means 1 point each sentence, true or false. You have 15 gaps. This has not changed, 2 points each. And please be careful with this part, because last year, during the second semester, I used a provision which was a bit difficult. However, the top students found the answers, but etc. And the last part is only 20 points. It's for those of you who would like to have a higher mark. But anyway, I think you can write something. For example, last year, we will do that this year too. We will talk about abortion under Japanese law. So you see how kind I am. Abortion under Japanese law. Yes, if you were attending the lecture, there is something you can write. It was almost half a lecture dedicated to abortion. So yes, I guess there's something you can write about the topic. Or minors' capacity to act under Japanese law. This was also 1 lecture last year. So you see that the last part is quite easy, but you need to write something in English. However, if you are well prepared, you will receive 60 points, 30 plus 30, and plus 20 from your attendance and participation. You already have 80 points, and don't worry, because I give the top student 100 points, and usually nobody gets that with his own powers, so I need to add some points to the others too, so that's how it happens, etc. Oh yes, the top student will get 100, okay? That's a promise from me. I always do that every year. The top student, even if it's 85, it becomes 100, and I add 15 to all the other students, etc. Yeah, so if you see 100 on your score sheet, it means that you were the top student or one of the top students, okay? Usually there are 3 students. Yes, Kwan, what's your question? Could you please pass the mic?
Oh, does it mean that, like, if the best student gets, let's say, 70, you will plus 30 to everyone, right?
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
So the question. Okay. So the question is, I know, why do I do that? Because otherwise it's unfair. Maybe my questions are easy one year, difficult the next year, etc. So if the top student only got 70, it means that my questions were really hard, really difficult to answer. So it's unfair to say that, oh yeah, last year the top student was 100, but this year it's 70. So I always do that. I always add some points. But usually top students, so the top students usually get 85, around 85, so I add 15 points to all of you. So if you get a failing grade, it means that you did not reach 60, even though I added 15, and even though I treated 55 as being 60. I also do that. When students get 55, I'm like, maybe, I'm 60, and etc. So usually you will not see marks from 55 to 60. All the students who get 55 automatically get 60. Which means that you only got 40 actually. It became 55 and then it became 60, etc. But do not rely on that. This year we have some special students. Chisaki, for example. But I don't know what they will do the final exams. That's another issue. But anyway, this is the content of the questions. Any other questions regarding final exams? No? Okay, so would you like me to show you again this during the last lecture? Or, because you know, during the last lecture you will have some newcomers, people who have not been to this lecture at all, but they only come to the 15th lecture. If you feel that it's unfair, then I can just omit this part and do a revision. You don't care, so we'll show it again. Okay, thank you. So, let's move back. Oh, yeah, I managed to do it. Okay, so I'm becoming a bit better. So, let's move back to the material. I was thinking about an issue. Have you been told that you look like somebody? You look like an actor. Oh, really? Wow. You look like an actor or a famous singer, etc. Yeah, I've been told too, so let me show you who. The first time was when I was chewing a gum. When I was young, I was chewing a gum. So a friend of mine was Googling on her mobile, and she showed me a picture, and she told me, you look like this. And she showed me this. And she told me that, you know, when you're chewing a gum, you look like a camel. That was the first time I was told that I looked like somebody. It was not even a human being, but anyway. Now, the next time was some years ago. I was teaching at Doshisha Women's University. Oh, a cultural issue, because this lecture is law and culture in Japan. In Japan, we have the so-called women's universities, Kyoto Women's University, Doshisha Women's University, etc. According to my understanding, parents send their daughters there because they want to avoid some dangerous contacts with male students, and it also gives them a higher status because the tuition fees are more expensive in those universities, etc. So I was teaching a lecture there, and a female student came after the lecture, and she told me, Professor, there's somebody you look like. It was my second experience. So I was like, so who is it? Is it, for example, a handsome actor or somebody? So she was like, no. And I was like, no, that's too many no's. You can just say one no. And she told me that I look like this. This was my second experience. And this has indeed happened, okay? I didn't make it up. And she showed me this photo. And I'm sorry, but I don't know who this guy is. Do you know who he or she? Is it he or she? He's not even a human being, but anyway. So she told me, you look like this. And when we finished with the lectures, she bought me a small key holder with this thing on it, and I still have it. So next time, please tell me that I look like somebody who's a human being. Okay, please try to move to the human world, not the animal world. So let's move to the second half. Attempts. What's that? When you have these telephone frauds, sometimes the victim realizes that it's a fraud. The question is, so is the act of trying to defraud him or her not punished? The answer is, actually, it is punishable. So please have a look at articles 43, 44 first. Who would like to read both the articles? Oh, yes, sorry, it's Chisaki's turn because...
Article 43. The punishment of a person who commences a crime without completing it may be reduced, provided, however, that voluntary abandonment of commission of the crime shall lead to the punishment being reduced or the offender being exculpated. Okay, and then Article 44, an attempt is punishable only when specifically so provided in the article concerned.
So, please have a look at Article 44 first. It says that an attempt is punishable only, so please underline, only when specifically so provided in the article concerned. Which means that if there is no article saying that the attempt is punishable, then it's not punished. If there is an article which says that attempt is also punishable, then it's punishable. For example, please have a look at Article 250. Who would like to read it? Okay, Lily, please.
Article 250. An attempt of the crimes prescribed under this chapter shall be punished.
Thank you. So, your question would be, which is this chapter? Well, you can see that it includes anyway Articles 249 and 246, which means that an attempt of fraud and an attempt of extortion is punished. It is punishable. Why? Because we have Article 250, which says that attempts are also punished. Next question. How is an attempt punished? We move back to Article 43. It says, the punishment of a person who commences a crime without completing it may, so please underline may be reduced. So Article 43 says, the punishment of a person who commences a crime without completing it may be reduced. What does that mean? It's not an obligation. It doesn't mean that the judge is obliged to reduce the punishment because it's only an attempt. He can also sentence the person with the full punishment. Now, there is also a provided, which says, Article 43, second part, provided, however, that voluntary abandonment of commission of the crime shall lead to the punishment, please underline, being reduced or the offender being exculpated. So, here, it's an obligation. It's not a may. It says being reduced or being exculpated. Why? Because, please also underline, there is a voluntary abandonment of commission of the crime. If you come to my lecture during the second semester, we will talk about details of this provision. Is that voluntary? For example, when I'm trying to commit a crime and I hear the police sirens and I understand that there is a police car approaching, and then I say, oh, I just abandoned the crime. Is that voluntary, for example? We'll talk about that in the second semester. Here, you only need to remember these basic issues. Next, if you move back to the article from the Japan Times, second page, it says that usually the people do not collect the cash in persons. And it also gives an advice. It says, criminals of Japan, if you do the math, going in person isn't a wise choice. So, that means that we don't have only one person committing this crime. We also have people who are helping. And there is a provision in the Penal Code, Article 60. Who would like to read Article 60 of the Penal Code? Yes, please, Matthew.
2 or more persons who commit a crime in joint action are all principals.
Thank you. Which means that all of them are punished as being a principal. All of them get a full punishment. Now, on this slide, you can see a new act. It's called Act on Punishment of Organized Crimes and Control of Crime Proceeds. This is an act which focuses on crimes committed by organizations, so it's an organized crime. The question is, why do we have this act? It has to do with Japanese history and culture again. Question to you. In general, when we talk about organized crimes in Japan, the first organization we would think about is the Japanese mafia, the Yakuza, which also appeared in the article of the Japan Times. My question is, which is the second type of a group, an organization, which led actually to the establishment of this special act? If you know some elements of Japanese history or about Japanese society, let me give you a hint. In Japan, there was an incident which happened in 1995. Okay, Matthew.
It'll be cults, like the sarin gas attack.
Excellent, thank you very much. How did you know the year when it happened?
I wrote a very critical essay about how
could you use them? Yeah.
I wrote a very critical paper about the argument for the Fukushima nuclear explosion being a turning point, and I said, well, 95 is meant to be a turning point, and it turned out not to be.
Oh, that's excellent. I also read a lot of articles, but I remember none of them. So anyway, so what happened in 1995? Matthew gave us all the details. There was a sarin gas attack focused on the Japanese subway. 3 lines were attacked, 13 people died, and thousands were injured. And this incident was caused by a Japanese cult, a religious organization. So, this act, the Act on Punishment of Organized Crimes and Control of Crime Proceeds, was established in 1999. So you can see the connection. 1995, this, and also many incidents from the past by the Japanese Yakuza, and 1999, this act. So, what does this act say? It makes the punishment more severe if the people who committed the person who committed the crime belongs to an organization. So if the crime is an organized crime. How? Please have a look at the underlined part. It says, if such crimes are committed, okay, let me first read the underlined part. Imprisonment with work for not less than 1 year and not more than 20 years. Is that different? Yes. Please have a look at Article 246. Article 246 says, punished by imprisonment with work for not more than 10 years, which means 1 month to 10 years. Here you have 1 year to 20 years. What's different? Well, the persons who committed the crime belong to an organization. It's an organized crime. So, taking consideration of that element, the punishment is more severe. The same applies to extortion. Please have a look at Article 249. It says again, punishment, imprisonment with work for not more than 10 years. So you see again, here it should be 30 days to 1 year to 10 years, which becomes 1 year to 20 years. So the punishment is more severe, taking into consideration the organized crime element. As we read in the article, people who commit such frauds usually ask you to transfer money to a bank account. So, you would think, wow, excellent. So you can easily catch that person because you know the bank account details. So if I ask you to transfer the money to Mizuho Bank, Carrascos Antonios Evangelos, 21, etc., then you can just tell the police it's a guy called Carrascos, he has a bank account, and they will come and they will arrest me. So, as I told you, people who do organized crime are clever, they don't do that. They, for example, target you. Let's say that you don't have money. Some of you have, some of you don't. If you don't have money, they will tell you, could I borrow your bank account? I will pay you 100,000 yen. You're like, wow, my bank account is empty, so yeah, you can use it and give me the 100,000 yen. And one day the police comes to you and tells you, there has been some money transferred to your account by frauds. Do you know anything about that? Why? Because the person who borrowed your account, of course, uses that account for such purposes. So, first, using bank accounts of others. So now we are talking about their punishment, the people who commit the fraud, is punished by imprisonment with fork for not more than 5 years and or fine of not more than 3 million yen. It's the same act again. So you can see that these cults or the Japanese mafia were using actually bank accounts of others or under fictitious names. Now, we have also the issue of concurrence of crimes, in Japanese, kyogo. What's that? It's a situation where you have one act which falls under many provisions. For example, a person defrauds another person, asks him or her to send money to a bank account which belongs to another person. If the person who committed the fraud is caught, he will be charged 1 for fraud and 2 for concealment of proceeds of crime because he was using the bank account of another person, not his bank account. So the question is, yes, if you see this slide, the punishments for these two crimes are different. The fraud would be imprisonment for not more than 10 years, and as you remember, if he or she belongs to an organized crime group, etc., it will be 1 year to 20 years. And the concealment of proceeds of crime is imprisonment with fork for not more than 5 years, so the punishment is less severe. And we also have a fine of not more than 3 million yen. So the question is, what does the judge do in such cases? The answer is written in Article 54 of the Japanese Penal Code. Who would like to read the article? Okay, Matthew, please.
When a single act constitutes 2 or more separate crimes, or when an act as the means or results of a crime constitutes another crime, the greatest among punishments prescribed for such crimes shall be imposed.
Thank you. Please underline the greatest among the punishments. I like the sound. It sounds like from the movie Lord of the Rings, doesn't it? The greatest among the punishments. Anyway, so the answer is that you impose the greatest among the punishments, which means that in this case, let's say that the person who committed the fraud does not belong to an organized crime, etc. group. It will be imprisonment with fork for not more than 10 years, because that's the most severe, or and fine of not more than 3 million yen. So you take both elements, and you also use the most severe element. That will be the punishment which can be sentenced in this case. And finally, we have another act on prevention or transfer of criminal proceeds. I was telling you that actually when you want to commit a fraud, usually use the bank account of another person. This, as an act, is also separately regulated and punished by the Act on Prevention of Transfer of Criminal Proceeds. Imprisonment with work for not more than 1 year, or a fine of not more than 1 million yen. And if it is done as a business, then the punishment is more severe. So, this is the content I have prepared for you today. Do you have any questions regarding today's lecture? Yes, please, could you pass the microphone to Calvin?
Okay, but when it says the most severe, meaning that the option of 3 million yen fine is no longer available, right?
Okay, that's a good question. So, in this case, you have two types of punishment. You have the imprisonment with work, which appears in both crimes, and you have the one you said, the fine, which appears only in the second case. So, the fine is the most severe punishment from that aspect, so we keep that. And then we compare the imprisonment with work. The first says 10 years, the other says 5 years, so we use the first. So it becomes imprisonment with work for not more than 10 years, or and, maybe or, maybe and, it depends on the case, fine of not more than 3 million. Okay, any other questions? Yes, please, lady. Oh, the mic.
In the final exam, do we have to know like the exact like punishment, like for example like 10 years and like the numbers and like specific like?
No, the answer is no. Okay. You don't need to remember these numbers, but if you remember, there was a lecture about minors, and we had, for example, 15 years old for will, 18 years for something, etc. Those numbers, you need to remember them. But you don't need to remember how many years or how many years. Any other questions? Thank you. So, see you next week. Let me just, one last thing from me. Can we finish? Sorry. Yeah. Just one more small thing and we finish. So, we have only 3 more lectures. The contents will be the following. Next week we will talk about food and product safety, then false accusations in criminal cases, and finally bioethics. A small advice from me, that's why I showed you this, because Lily also asked about the final exams. These parts are very easy for me to use for the third question, for example, the question of the short essay. And in general, they have many elements which are easy for me to use in the final exam. So please be careful of the last 3 lectures too, okay? Thank you. See you next. Oh, yeah. Okay, thank you.